Called incapable his whole life, he proved that no one can limit a free mind. His quiet victory will deeply inspire you. Stay until the end and subscribe for more stories like this one. In the pristine halls of Newton Preparatory Academy, nestled in the affluent suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts, Ethan Miller was a conspicuous anomaly. The 16-year-old sophomore moved through the corridors like a foreign particle in a sterilized environment, drawing sidelong glances from students and teachers alike. It wasn't his appearance that marked him as different. With his unruly brown hair and standard-issue khakis and button-down, he looked like any other student. It was something less tangible, a quality that radiated from him like an invisible aura that said, "I don't fit here and I never will." "Mr. Miller, perhaps you could grace us with your attention for once." Ms. Harrington's sharp voice cut through the advanced calculus classroom, causing several students to smirk. Ethan's gaze drifted from the window where he'd been watching the patterns of light through the maple trees, mathematical sequences forming and reforming in his mind. "I asked what method you would use to approach this integration problem," she continued, tapping her manicured nail against the whiteboard where a complex equation sprawled like an incomprehensible language to most of the class. Ethan glanced at the board. "I wouldn't use that method at all," he replied softly. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Nobody contradicted Ms. Harrington, especially not in her advanced calculus class, the crown jewel of Newton Prep's mathematics department. "Excuse me?" Her voice dropped to a dangerous octave. "The standard approach creates unnecessary steps. If you rearrange it first and apply a geometric visualization, you'd see the pattern immediately." Ethan began sketching rapidly in his notebook, unaware of the deepening scowl on his teacher's face. "That's quite enough, Mr. Miller. See me after class." She turned back to the board, shoulders rigid. "As I was saying before being interrupted, the conventional method." Beside him, Jessica Thompson leaned over and whispered, "Way to be a freak again, Miller. Some of us actually want to pass the standard way." Ethan didn't respond. After 3 semesters at Newton Prep, he'd learned that invisibility was the best defense. His scholarship to the prestigious academy had seemed like a miracle to his single mother, a nurse who worked double shifts to keep them afloat in their modest apartment on the edges of Cambridge. For her, Newton Prep represented opportunity. For Ethan, it had become a daily exercise in endurance. After class, Ms. Harrington's assessment was predictably stern. "Your attitude is becoming a problem, Ethan. Your constant need to question established methods disrupts the learning environment. But if there's a better way..." "There's the Newton way," she interrupted, sliding his latest test across her desk. A red C+ glared up at him, despite every answer being correct. "Your work shows careless disregard for proper methodology. You skip steps, you use unconventional approaches, and you fail to show your work in the approved format." Ethan stared at the grade, a familiar heaviness settling in his chest. "The answers are right, though. This isn't just about right answers. It's about discipline, about learning to follow instructions. Something you seem pathologically incapable of doing." She sighed, removing her glasses. "Frankly, I'm beginning to wonder if you're suited for Newton at all." The words stung more than they should have. After all, he'd heard variations of the same sentiment from nearly every teacher since his arrival. Too distracted, unmotivated, doesn't apply himself. The remarks on his report cards painted a portrait of academic mediocrity that contradicted everything he knew about himself. Walking through the hallway toward his next class, Ethan caught a glimpse of the main bulletin board, where a new announcement had been posted. A crowd of students had gathered, their excited murmurs creating a buzz of anticipation. "What's going on?" he asked Ryan Chen, one of the few students who occasionally acknowledged his existence. Ryan, engrossed in his phone, barely looked up. "Some big math competition thing. Apparently, it's a famous unsolved problem that Newton's sponsoring for the best prep schools in New England." Major prestige points for whoever cracks it. Ethan pushed forward slightly, scanning the announcement. The Convergence Challenge, he read aloud, a theoretical mathematics problem with applications in quantum computing requiring novel approaches to nonlinear systems. Yeah, basically impossible, Ryan shrugged. Even Dr. Winters says it's mostly for show. Nobody's actually expected to solve it. Dr. Elijah Winters, the head of mathematics at Newton and something of a minor celebrity in academic circles, had apparently introduced the challenge as a way to elevate Newton's already stellar reputation. The announcement detailed how teams from each participating school would present their attempts at a solution during the spring academic showcase, with Newton hosting the prestigious event. Throughout the day, Ethan heard snippets of conversation about the challenge. Teachers discussed it during class transitions, emphasizing how participation alone would look impressive on college applications. Students debated which senior math prodigies might have a chance at making progress on the problem. No one mentioned Ethan's name. Why would they? On paper, he was barely maintaining a B average, a scholarship student who many teachers had already written off as a disappointment. During lunch, he sat alone as usual, opening his battered copy of a graduate-level book on theoretical mathematics he'd found at a used bookstore. As he ate his sandwich, he scribbled notes in the margins, lost in the elegant dance of numbers and symbols that had always made more sense to him than people. That's not exactly light reading. The voice startled him. Looking up, he saw Olivia Reyes, editor of the school newspaper and one of Newton's most accomplished students. With her perfect GPA and early acceptance to Princeton, she existed in a social stratosphere far removed from Ethan's solitary corner of the cafeteria. "It's interesting," he mumbled, closing the book self-consciously. She tilted her head, studying him with curious brown eyes. "You're Ethan Miller, right? I hear things about you." "Nothing good, I'm sure." He couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "Actually, Mr. Abernathy says you ask questions that make him think, and that's from the toughest physics teacher in school." She slid into the seat across from him, an unexpected move that drew curious glances from nearby tables. "I'm doing a feature on the Convergence Challenge for the paper. Thinking about trying it?" Ethan almost laughed. "Right. I'm sure Dr. Winters would love to have the class underachiever represent Newton." "So you're not even curious about the problem?" She raised an eyebrow. Before he could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. Dr. Winters himself was entering the cafeteria, followed by several members of the mathematics faculty. Tall and imposing with his silver hair and perpetual bow tie, he commanded immediate respect. "Attention, students," he announced, his resonant voice silencing the cafeteria instantly. "As you've likely heard, Newton Prep is hosting this year's Convergence Challenge. This represents an unprecedented opportunity for our institution to demonstrate its mathematical excellence." He proceeded to explain the significance of the problem, its connections to emerging fields of technology, and the prestige it would bring to any school that made significant progress. "While we don't expect a complete solution," he added with a confident smile, "our faculty has already begun preliminary work that we believe will set the standard for the competition." As he spoke, Ethan found himself drawn to the mathematical description. Something about the way Dr. Winters characterized the problem struck him as fundamentally flawed. The approach the faculty was taking seemed to miss the underlying elegance of the challenge. After Dr. Winters finished speaking, the cafeteria erupted into excited conversation. Olivia had taken out her notebook, jotting down quotes for her article. "You look like you want to say something," she observed, noticing Ethan's furrowed brow. "They're overthinking it," he said quietly, "making it more complicated than it needs to be." She studied him for a moment. "You should get a copy of the full problem statement. It's in the library." With that cryptic suggestion, she gathered her things and left, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. That afternoon, instead of heading straight home, Ethan found himself wandering into Newton's vast library. Unlike the modernized classrooms and facilities, the library retained its old-world charm, with oak shelves reaching toward ornate ceilings and hidden alcoves perfect for solitary study. "Can I help you find something?" The question came from Mr. Bennett, the elderly librarian whose kind eyes behind thick glasses had always regarded Ethan without the judgment he faced elsewhere. "I'm looking for information on the Convergence Challenge," Ethan admitted. Mr. Bennett's eyes lit up. "Ah, Dr. Winter's pet project, follow me." In a quiet corner of the mathematics section, Mr. Bennett pulled out a thick folder. The complete problem statement and background materials. Dr. Winters had these prepared for the faculty working group, but there's no reason an interested student shouldn't have access. He handed the folder to Ethan with a conspiratorial wink. Later, that evening, in the small bedroom of the apartment he shared with his mother, Ethan spread the papers across his desk. As he read through the dense mathematical notation, something stirred within him, a sense of recognition, as if he'd been waiting for this particular problem his entire life. The challenge was indeed formidable, combining elements of several mathematical disciplines in ways that defied conventional approaches. Yet as he studied it, Ethan began to see patterns emerging, connections that hinted at an underlying structure, elegant in its simplicity. Without fully realizing what he was doing, he grabbed a notebook and began sketching ideas, approaches that diverged wildly from the methodologies suggested in the faculty notes. Hours passed unnoticed as he worked, his mind finally free to dance with numbers in the way it had always longed to. When his mother checked on him at midnight, returning exhausted from her evening shift, she found him surrounded by pages of calculations, his eyes bright with a passion she hadn't seen in months. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked, concern etching her tired face. Ethan looked up, a smile slowly spreading across his features. "Yeah, Mom. I think maybe it could be." The Newton Preparatory Academy Library became Ethan's sanctuary over the following weeks. Each day after classes ended, he would slip into the building's west wing, past the main study areas where students gathered in chattering groups, and into the dusty archive section where few ventured. Mr. Bennett had quietly granted him access to a small wooden table tucked between shelves of mathematical journals dating back to the 1800s. "Not many students appreciate these old volumes," Mr. Bennett had told him, running a finger lovingly along the spine of a leather-bound collection of papers from the Royal Mathematical Society. "But sometimes the answers we seek aren't in the latest textbooks." Ethan nodded gratefully, recognizing in the elderly librarian a kindred spirit who understood the value of unconventional paths. Unlike his teachers, Mr. Bennett never questioned why Ethan preferred to work alone, or why his approach to mathematics often diverged from standard curricula. He simply provided space and occasionally left relevant books on the table, appearing and disappearing with a discretion that Ethan deeply appreciated. The Convergence Challenge had become Ethan's obsession. Each evening, he would rush home to continue his work, converting his bedroom wall into a sprawling canvas of equations, diagrams, and connections that his mother regarded with bemused concern. "Honey, I haven't seen you this excited about school in a long time," Sarah Miller remarked one night, setting a plate of dinner beside his notebook. The single mother worked as an ICU nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, her shifts often, leaving her exhausted but never too tired to check on her son's well-being. "It's not exactly for school," Ethan replied, reluctantly pausing his calculations. "It's this math problem that everyone thinks is impossible." Sarah sat on the edge of his bed, her nurse's scrubs still on from her day shift. "And you think it's not impossible?" Ethan hesitated. I think everyone's looking at it wrong. They're using complicated methods because that's what they've been taught. But sometimes the simplest path is hidden because nobody thinks to look for it." A soft smile crossed Sarah's face. That sounds like something your father would say. The mention of his father sent a familiar pang through Ethan's chest. David Miller had been a brilliant engineer whose career was cut short by a devastating illness when Ethan was only 7. His father's approach to problems, seeing connections where others saw only chaos, had shaped Ethan's thinking from an early age. I wish he could help me with this, Ethan admitted quietly. Sarah squeezed his shoulder. He'd be proud of you for trying, no matter what your teachers think. She glanced at the clock. But he'd also want you to eat dinner before it gets cold. At school, Ethan maintained his facade of disinterested mediocrity. He answered questions when called upon, but never volunteered insights. He submitted assignments that followed prescribed methodologies, even when he saw clearer alternatives. The isolation was familiar, almost comfortable in its predictability, until Olivia Reyes disrupted the pattern. "You've been disappearing after school," she observed, sliding into the seat across from him in the cafeteria one Tuesday. Her unexpected appearance at his table had become a semi-regular occurrence that still managed to startle him. "I study in the library," he replied cautiously. "The library closes at 5. Mrs. Peterson says you're still there when she locks up at 6:30. Olivia tilted her head, journalist curiosity evident in her direct gaze. "Mr. Bennett's giving you after-hours access, isn't he?" Ethan stiffened. "Ethan, are you going to report that in your school newspaper? Actually, I was going to ask if you'd let me see what you're working on." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I know you're tackling the Convergence Challenge, and I think that's a much more interesting story than whatever sanitized version of events Dr. Winters is feeding us about the faculty's progress." Before Ethan could respond, a shadow fell across the table. Dr. Benjamin Clark, head of the science department and Dr. Winters' most ardent supporter, loomed over them with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Reyes, I hope you're not wasting your valuable time." His gaze flicked dismissively to Ethan. "The newspaper should focus on Newton's actual achievements, not flights of fancy." Olivia straightened, her expression professionally neutral. "I'm covering all aspects of the challenge, Dr. Clark. That includes student perspectives." "Admirable thoroughness," he replied coolly. "Though I'd suggest interviewing students from the advanced mathematics track who are actually contributing to the faculty's research team. Mr. Miller's creative approach to academic requirements hardly qualifies him to comment on serious mathematical research." Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the table, his ears burning with humiliation. Dr. Clark had been particularly pointed in his criticism since the semester began, seeming to take personal offense at Ethan's presence in Newton's hallowed halls. After the teacher moved away, Olivia met Ethan's gaze. "He's wrong, you know." "How would you know?" Ethan's voice was bitter. "You've never even seen my work." "Dales." "Because I recognize that look you get when you're thinking about the problem. It's the same look my dad gets when he's onto something in his research at MIT. She gathered her belongings, then hesitated. "Meet me in the East Courtyard after school if you want to talk more." Against his better judgment, Ethan found himself in the courtyard that afternoon, half expecting Olivia to have forgotten or changed her mind. Instead, he found her sitting on a stone bench beneath a flowering dogwood tree, laptop open on her knees. "I thought you might not come," she said, patting the space beside her. "Why do you care about what I'm doing?" he asked bluntly, remaining standing. Olivia closed her laptop. "Because I'm tired of the status quo at this school. Everyone pretends Newton is about academic excellence, but it's really about conformity dressed up as achievement." Her frustration sounded deeply personal. "When my family moved here from Los Angeles last year, I thought an elite East Coast prep school would be intellectually stimulating. Instead, it's just a factory for Ivy League applications." Ethan hadn't known she was relatively new to Newton. With her confidence and social ease, he'd assumed she'd always been part of the established order. "So I'm what? Your rebellion against the system?" he asked skeptically. "You're interesting," she corrected, "and maybe the only person here who's actually approaching the challenge as, well, a genuine challenge rather than a resume-building exercise." Something in her earnest expression made Ethan relent. Reluctantly, he sat beside her and pulled out his most recent notebook, filled with densely packed equations and diagrams. "I've been working backward from their assumptions," he explained, feeling strangely nervous. "The faculty team is using conventional network analysis because that's what Dr. Winters specializes in. But I think this is actually about pattern recognition across dimensions." As he walked her through his approach, Ethan was surprised by Olivia's insightful questions. Though not a mathematics specialist, her logical thinking and quick grasp of concepts made her an ideal sounding board. For the first time, articulating his ideas to someone else helped Ethan refine his thinking and spot weaknesses in his approach. Their courtyard meetings became a regular occurrence, a strange partnership, forming between the school's social outcast and one of its most prominent students. Olivia never mentioned their collaboration to others, respecting Ethan's desire to work in secrecy, away from the judgment and skepticism that had become his daily experience at Newton. 3 weeks into his investigation of the challenge, Ethan hit a substantial roadblock. His approach had yielded promising initial results, but a critical connection eluded him. He sat in the library archives, frustration building, as he reworked the same sequence of equations for the 5th time. "Perhaps I can help," a quiet voice offered. Ethan looked up to find Mr. Bennett standing nearby, his eyes focused on the papers spread across the table. "I was a mathematician before becoming a librarian," the older man explained, seeing Ethan's surprise. "Nothing as prestigious as our esteemed faculty, but I did spend some years at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton." "You worked at the IAS?" Ethan's eyes widened. The institute was legendary, having hosted some of the greatest mathematical minds of the 20th century. Mr. Bennett smiled modestly. "As a research assistant primarily, but I learned to recognize elegant mathematics when I see it." He gestured to Ethan's work. "May I?" For the next hour, Ethan watched, in amazement, as the seemingly ordinary librarian engaged with his most complex ideas, offering subtle suggestions and asking precisely the right questions to guide Ethan's thinking without imposing his own approach. "You've found a truly innovative path," Mr. Bennett said finally, "but you're trying to force it into a framework that doesn't suit its nature." He sketched a simple diagram on a blank page. "Consider visualizing the problem this way, as a multi-dimensional space where these patterns exist simultaneously rather than sequentially." The suggestion triggered a cascade of new connections in Ethan's mind. "That's it," he breathed, hastily scribbling equations as understanding dawned. "We don't need to resolve the convergence directly. We can prove it exists by mapping the boundary conditions." Mr. Bennett watched with evident satisfaction. Sometimes the most profound insights appear simple in retrospect. That's how you know they're true. As weeks passed, Ethan's solution took shape, not as a conventional proof, but as an elegantly interconnected system that revealed the underlying structure of the problem. Working in his isolated corner of the library and late into the night, at home, he constructed an approach that bypassed the computational complexity that had stymied the faculty team's efforts. Olivia continued to meet with him, serving as both supporter and critic, helping him clarify his thinking and occasionally bringing reference materials she'd sourced through her father's academic connections. Their unlikely friendship deepened, founded on mutual respect and a shared sense of operating outside Newton's rigid social and academic hierarchies. One evening, as they walked from the school grounds toward the bus stop, Olivia asked the question, Ethan had been avoiding. What are you going to do when you've solved it? Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the assumption that his solution would be completed or accepted. Who says I'll solve it? I've seen your progress, she persisted. You're close. Closer than anyone else at Newton, including the faculty. Team. Dr. Winter's research group is still struggling with the fundamental approach, according to my sources. The thought of presenting his work to the same teachers who had dismissed him for years made Ethan's stomach clench with anxiety. They wouldn't believe it's my work anyway. Dr. Clark would probably accuse me of plagiarism. Olivia stopped walking, turning to face him directly. So you're just going to let them continue believing you're incapable? That you're just the scholarship kid who doesn't belong? Her words hit a nerve. Maybe I don't belong, he snapped. Maybe they've been right all along. That's not true, and you know it. Her voice softened. Ethan, you have a gift, and hiding it doesn't protect you. It just lets them win. As his bus appeared around the corner, Ethan's mind raced with conflicting emotions. Pride in his work, fear of rejection, and a growing seed of determination that perhaps, just this once, he could force the world to see him as he truly was. I need to finish it first, he said finally. Really finish it without any gaps or assumptions. Then we'll talk about what comes next. Olivia nodded, understanding the unspoken promise in his words. As Ethan boarded the bus, his notebook clutched. Tightly against his chest, he felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. For the first time since arriving at Newton Preparatory Academy, he was allowing himself to imagine a different future, one where his true capabilities could no longer be ignored or dismissed. That night, working by the dim light of his desk lamp while his mother slept, Ethan made the breakthrough he'd been seeking for weeks. The solution unveiled itself with such clarity and elegance that he sat back, momentarily stunned by its simplicity. The most complex mathematical challenge that Newton had ever presented had resolved itself into a pattern so beautiful it almost brought tears to his eyes. As the first light of dawn filtered through his window, Ethan carefully organized his proof into a coherent structure, knowing that the truly difficult challenge still lay ahead, convincing a world determined not to see him that he was, in fact, worthy of being seen. The Newton Prep faculty lounge buzzed with activity as Dr. Elijah Winters paced before a whiteboard covered in complex mathematical notations. Around him, 8 teachers from the mathematics and physics departments sat reviewing printouts of the latest attempt at tackling the convergence challenge. Their expressions ranged from exhaustion to frustration. We're missing something fundamental, Dr. Winters admitted, running a hand through his silver hair. Our approach is sound theoretically, but we keep hitting computational dead ends. Dr. Benjamin Clark leaned forward, his thin face tense with concern. The showcase is only 3 weeks away, Elijah. We need to have something substantial to present. I'm aware of the timeline, Benjamin, Dr. Winters replied tersely. Perhaps if we reconsider the network modeling approach. Excuse me? The tentative interruption came from Ms. Harrington, who had just entered the room. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a student insisting on speaking with you about the challenge. Dr. Winters sighed impatiently. We've already selected the student representatives from the advanced mathematics track. Please tell whoever it is that the team is finalized. It's Ethan Miller, Ms. Harrington said, an odd note in her voice. He claims to have a solution. A moment of silence fell over the room before Dr. Clark let out a sharp laugh. Miller? The underperforming sophomore who can't even follow basic calculus procedures? This is absurd. Dr. Winters frowned. Miller? Remind me. Scholarship student, gifted test scores, but mediocre performance, Ms. Harrington supplied. Unusual thinking patterns, frequently disruptive. Ah, yes. Dr. Winters waved a dismissive hand. Tell him we appreciate his interest, but the challenge is being handled by qualified individuals. Before Ms. Harrington could leave, a new voice joined the conversation. I think we should hear him out. All heads turned toward Mr. Bennett, who rarely attended faculty meetings and almost never spoke at them. The elderly librarian stood in the doorway, his gentle demeanor contrasting with the uncharacteristic firmness in his voice. With all due respect, Harold, Dr. Clark began condescendingly, this is a serious academic endeavor, not a charity project for encouraging struggling students. With all due respect, Dr. Clark, Mr. Bennett replied, his soft voice somehow cutting through the tension. I've been observing Mr. Miller's work for weeks. His approach is unlike anything your team has considered. He looked directly at Dr. Winters. I spent 12 years at the Institute for Advanced Study, Elijah. I recognize genuine insight when I see it. The mention of the prestigious institute created a subtle shift in the room. Dr. Winters studied Mr. Bennett thoughtfully, then nodded. Very well. Send him in, Ms. Harrington. Let's see what the boy has to offer. When Ethan entered the faculty lounge moments later, he felt as though he had walked into the den of predators. 8 pairs of eyes tracked his movement, skepticism and dismissal evident in most gazes. He clutched his notebook and a folder of meticulously organized papers, his heart pounding so loudly he was certain everyone could hear it. Mr. Miller, Dr. Winters said, his tone professionally polite but cool. I understand you wish to present something regarding the convergence challenge. Ethan swallowed hard, fighting the instinct to flee. He caught sight of Mr. Bennett giving him an encouraging nod, and beside him stood Olivia, who had insisted on accompanying him as moral support. Her presence, unauthorized in this faculty sanctum, drew irritated glances that she ignored with practiced ease. Yes, sir, Ethan managed, his voice steadier than he felt. I've been working on the challenge since it was announced, and I believe I've found a viable solution. Dr. Clark scoffed audibly. A complete solution when our research team of PhDs has barely made progress? Perhaps that's precisely why he succeeded where we've struggled, Mr. Bennett suggested quietly. Fresh perspectives sometimes see what experience blinds us to. Dr. Winters gestured to the whiteboard. Very well, Mr. Miller. You have 10 minutes to present your approach. We'll try to keep an open mind. Fighting his nerves, Ethan moved to the board and began erasing the existing equations. The action, borderline sacrilegious in this context, caused several teachers to shift uncomfortably. But Ethan needed a clean slate for what he was about to present. The fundamental problem with the conventional approach, he began, his voice gaining strength as he focused on the mathematics rather than his audience, is that it treats the system as a network of sequential relationships, but the convergence pattern is multidimensional. It exists across several simultaneous states. As he began sketching his alternative framework, the room remained skeptically silent, but as his explanation progressed, the quality of that silence changed. Initial dismissal gave way to confusion, then reluctant attention, and finally, from at least some of the faculty, dawning comprehension. This visualization technique, Dr. Winters interrupted after several minutes, pointing to Ethan's unconventional diagram. I've never seen this application before. I developed it based on some concepts I found in older mathematical journals, Ethan explained, gaining confidence. It allows us to map relationships that traditional notation struggles to represent efficiently. And this sequence here, Dr. Harrison, the applied mathematics teacher, leaned forward with newfound interest. You're suggesting the convergence can be proven indirectly? Yes, by establishing boundary conditions that demonstrate the only possible state must be convergent. Ethan turned another page in his notebook. Once we accept that the system exists in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, the proof becomes relatively straightforward. For the next 20 minutes, well beyond his allotted time, Ethan walked the faculty through his solution. As he spoke, the expressions around him transformed. Skepticism gave way to intense focus, then to the unmistakable recognition that they were witnessing something extraordinary, all except Dr. Clark, whose face had progressively hardened into a mask of disbelief and thinly veiled anger. When Ethan finished his presentation, a heavy silence filled the room. Dr. Winters stared at the whiteboard, now covered in Ethan's elegant mathematical architecture, his expression inscrutable. "This is," he began, then paused, seeming to search for appropriate words. "This is highly unorthodox. It's nonsensical," Dr. Clark cut in sharply. "A hodgepodge of techniques pulled from various sources without proper rigor or foundation." "Actually," Dr. Harrison interjected, "I believe the foundation is sound, Benjamin. Unconventional, certainly, but I'm not seeing obvious flaws in the logical structure." "You can't seriously be considering this amateur attempt," Dr. Clark protested. "The boy has mediocre grades in every mathematics course he's taken." "Because I don't follow your procedures," Ethan said quietly, finding courage he didn't know he possessed. "Not because I don't understand the concepts." Dr. Clark's face flushed. "The procedures exist for a reason, Mr. Miller. Mathematics requires discipline and rigor, not creative interpretation. Does it?" Mr. Bennett's soft voice carried surprising weight. "I seem to recall that most significant mathematical breakthroughs throughout history came from those willing to think beyond established procedures." Dr. Winters held up a hand, silencing the brewing argument. He fixed Ethan with an evaluative stare. "Mr. Miller, where did you get these ideas? Who helped you develop this approach?" The implication was clear, and it stung worse than outright dismissal. "I developed it myself," Ethan answered, his voice tight. "Mr. Bennett provided some guidance when I got stuck, and Olivia helped me organize my thoughts, but the approach and solution are mine." "Convenient to have our librarian as your advocate," Dr. Clark remarked coldly, "but surely you understand our skepticism. Your academic record hardly suggests the capability to solve a problem that has challenged established mathematicians. Perhaps that speaks more to the limitations of how we evaluate students than to Mr. Miller's capabilities," Ms. Harrington surprised everyone by saying. She had been quietly reviewing Ethan's written materials while the discussion unfolded. "These notes are remarkably thorough and consistent. This isn't a fluke or plagiarism. This represents months of organized, progressive thinking." Ethan glanced at his calculus teacher in shock. Her recognition felt almost as significant as the solution itself. Dr. Winters took the folder from Ms. Harrington, examining the contents more carefully. "I'd like time to review this properly. If, and I stress if, the solution proves viable, we'll need to discuss how to proceed with the showcase. Surely you're not suggesting we present a sophomore student's work instead of the faculty's research?" Dr. Clark's voice had risen in pitch. "I'm suggesting we present the best approach Newton has to offer," Dr. Winters replied firmly, "whatever that may be." As the meeting dispersed, Ethan found himself in the hallway with Olivia and Mr. Bennett, still processing what had just occurred. "That was incredible," Olivia whispered, squeezing his arm. "Did you see their faces when they started to understand what you'd done?" "They haven't accepted it yet," Ethan cautioned, though he couldn't suppress a small smile of satisfaction. For perhaps the first time at Newton, he had been seen, really, seen for what he was capable of. Mr. Bennett placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Regardless of what happens next, Ethan, you should be proud. True intellectual courage isn't about getting the right answer. It's about pursuing truth, even when conventional wisdom stands against you." The following days passed in a strange limbo. Ethan attended his classes as usual, but the atmosphere had subtly shifted. Teachers who had previously ignored him now watched him with curious, evaluating eyes. Students who had never given him a second glance whispered as he passed, rumors of his challenge to the faculty spreading through Newton's efficient gossip network. Dr. Clark's advanced physics class became particularly uncomfortable. The teachers' barely concealed hostility manifested in pointed questions and thinly veiled remarks about the dangers of mathematical shortcuts and undisciplined thinking. 3 days after his presentation, Ethan was summoned to Dr. Winter's office. He found not only the mathematics department head waiting, but also Headmaster Lawrence, whose presence indicated the seriousness with which they were treating the situation. "Mr. Miller," Dr. Winters began formally, "we've thoroughly reviewed your solution to the convergence challenge." Ethan held his breath, bracing for rejection. "It is," Dr. Winters continued, his expression softening slightly, "quite remarkable. After verification by several faculty members, including specialists we consulted from MIT, we believe your approach is not only valid, but potentially groundbreaking in its application." The breath Ethan had been holding escaped in a rush. "You mean—" "Your solution will be presented at the showcase," Headmaster Lawrence confirmed, studying Ethan with newfound interest. "Dr. Winters tells me this could have significant implications beyond the challenge itself. The visualization technique alone has potential applications in quantum computing," Dr. Winters acknowledged. "We'd like you to work with the faculty team to prepare the presentation. Given the significance, several university representatives and industry leaders will be attending specifically to see this solution." As the implications dawned on him, Ethan felt a dizzying mixture of validation and disbelief. After years of being dismissed and underestimated, his work would not only be recognized, but celebrated on one of the most prestigious academic stages available to secondary students. "There is, however, one complication," Headmaster Lawrence added, his tone becoming more measured. "Dr. Clark has expressed concerns about the verifiability of your work. He's suggested that the solution should be presented as a collaborative effort between you and the faculty team, with Dr. Winters as lead presenter." The suggestion hit Ethan like a physical blow. After everything, they still couldn't fully acknowledge his achievement. They needed to claim partial ownership to maintain the illusion of institutional superiority. "That's not right," he said quietly but firmly. "I respect the faculty's expertise, but this solution is mine. I developed it independently, and I should present it." Dr. Winters and the headmaster exchanged glances. "You're very young, Ethan," Dr. Winters said carefully. "The audience will include serious academics and industry professionals. They might find it difficult to accept such advanced work from a sophomore student." "Then that's their limitation," Ethan replied, surprising himself with his boldness. "But I won't pretend this was a collaborative effort when it wasn't. That would be dishonest." A moment of tense silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, Headmaster Lawrence smiled. "Well said, Mr. Miller. Intellectual integrity should be valued above convenient narratives." He turned to Dr. Winters. "Elijah, arrange for Mr. Miller to be the primary presenter. The faculty team can contribute context and verification as needed." As Ethan left the office, a new reality began to take shape around him. In 3 weeks, he would stand before hundreds of academic elites and present his solution. The thought was terrifying, but not nearly as terrifying as the prospect of remaining invisible, his true capabilities forever hidden behind the limiting expectations of others. The evening of the New England Preparatory Schools Academic Showcase transformed Newton Academy's austere campus into a glittering hub of intellectual prestige. Luxury vehicles lined the circular driveway, discharging university representatives, industry leaders, and wealthy donors into the warm spring air. Inside the grand auditorium, program booklets highlighted the Convergence Challenge as the evening's centerpiece, with Ethan Miller's name printed in understated text beneath the bold Newton Preparatory Academy header. Backstage, Ethan paced, nervously, adjusting the tie that felt like a gentle noose around his neck. The suit his mother had purchased for the occasion, the first new suit he'd ever owned, still carried the stiff discomfort of unfamiliarity. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," Olivia observed, appearing beside him in an elegant blue dress, reporter's notebook in hand. As editor of the school paper, she had special access to the event's behind-the-scenes moments. "I might prefer that," Ethan admitted, glancing toward the stage where Dr. Winters was delivering opening remarks to the packed auditorium. "What if they don't understand? What if they think it's wrong? Then they'll reveal their own limitations, not yours." She straightened his tie with practiced ease. "Remember, you know this solution better than anyone in that room. You built it from nothing." Nearby, Dr. Clark watched their interaction with poorly concealed disdain. The physics teacher had maintained his skepticism despite the verification of Ethan's work, suggesting repeatedly in faculty meetings that the presentation should focus more on Newton's institutional contribution to mathematical excellence rather than on a single student's approach. 2 minutes, Mr. Miller, the stage manager announced, increasing Ethan's heart rate to a thundering pace. His mother appeared then, slipping past security with the visitor's badge Headmaster Lawrence had personally arranged for her. Sarah Miller looked both proud and anxious in her best dress, the one she usually reserved for parent-teacher conferences. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, embracing him quickly. "Your father would be..." Her voice caught slightly. "Well, he always knew you saw the world differently, in the best possible way." Before Ethan could respond, Dr. Winter's voice boomed through the auditorium speakers. "And now, the moment many of you have been waiting for, Newton Preparatory Academy is proud to present a groundbreaking solution to the Convergence Challenge, developed by sophomore student Ethan Miller, with verification from our distinguished mathematics faculty." A polite applause rippled through the audience as Ethan took a deep breath and stepped onto the brightly lit stage. Hundreds of faces stared back at him, expressions ranging from polite interest to open skepticism. In the front row, he spotted representatives from MIT, Stanford, and several technology companies whose names he recognized from news articles about quantum computing advances. For one terrifying moment, his mind went completely blank. Then he caught sight of Mr. Bennett in the third row, offering a small nod of encouragement, and beside him, his mother's anxious but loving face. Olivia had slipped into a seat at the back, her notebook poised. These people believed in him when no one else had. "Good evening," Ethan began, his voice surprisingly steady. "For the past several months, mathematicians have been approaching the Convergence Challenge using traditional network analysis methodologies. These approaches are elegant and powerful for many problems, but they share a fundamental limitation. They exist in sequential space." As he spoke, his initial nervousness melted away, replaced by the pure joy of explaining a mathematical insight that had consumed him for weeks. The solution, with all its elegance and implications, flowed through him as naturally as breathing. Using the advanced visualization system the IT department had set up for him, he guided the audience through his multidimensional approach, showing how conventional methods had missed the underlying pattern by focusing too narrowly on established techniques. By reconceptualizing the problem as existing across simultaneous states, he explained, manipulating the holographic model with fluid gestures, we can see that convergence isn't something to be calculated. It's a natural property of the system itself when viewed from the correct dimensional perspective. As understanding dawned across the audience, Ethan could feel the atmosphere in the auditorium shifting. Polite attention transformed into genuine engagement. Several professors were furiously taking notes, while industry representatives leaned forward in their seats, expressions of growing excitement on their faces. Dr. Winters, who had joined Ethan on stage for the technical verification portion, looked genuinely impressed. "What Mr. Miller has demonstrated," he added after Ethan completed his explanation, "is not merely a solution to an academic challenge, but potentially a new framework for approaching complex computational problems in quantum environments." During the question and answer session that followed, Ethan handled increasingly sophisticated inquiries with a confidence that surprised even himself. When Dr. Julian Chen from MIT's Quantum Information Systems Lab asked about applications to entanglement modeling, Ethan suggested an extension of his approach that made the distinguished professor nod with evident approval. "I believe we'll be hearing much more from Mr. Miller in the coming years," Dr. Chen remarked to the audience, generating a wave of appreciative applause. As the formal presentation concluded, Ethan found himself surrounded by university representatives offering business cards and invitations to summer programs. Technology industry recruiters spoke of internship opportunities and mentorship pathways. Headmaster Lawrence hovered nearby, his chest practically swelling with institutional pride, as though he had personally discovered Ethan's talent. Through it all, Ethan felt a strange sense of detachment, as if observing the scene from outside himself. This sudden attention, while validating, highlighted the arbitrary nature of how talent was recognized and valued. Nothing about him had changed, only the willingness of others to see what had always been there. Dr. Clark approached. As the crowd began to disperse, his expression carefully neutral. "Congratulations, Mr. Miller. It seems your unconventional approach has generated quite the response." The grudging acknowledgement might have been satisfying weeks ago, but Ethan now found he didn't need it. "Thank you, Dr. Clark. I appreciate the opportunity to present." "And do it, yes, well," the teacher cleared his throat. "We'll need to discuss your academic placement going forward. Clearly, the standard curriculum hasn't been sufficiently challenging for you." The irony of this statement after years of being labeled underperforming wasn't lost on Ethan, but he simply nodded politely. "I'd welcome that conversation." Later, as the formal reception wound down, Ethan escaped to a quiet corner of the Newton campus, the same weathered bench under the dogwood tree where he and Olivia had first discussed his approach to the challenge. The night air carried the scent of spring flowers and possibility. "There you are," Olivia said, finding him in his moment of solitude. "You're missing your own celebration. The president of Caltech is looking for you." Ethan smiled faintly. "I needed a minute to breathe. It's a lot to process." She sat beside him, setting aside her reporter's notebook. "You changed everything tonight, you know, not just for yourself." "What do you mean?" "I overheard Headmaster Lawrence talking with the board chairman. They're discussing a complete overhaul of Newton's assessment methods." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Your success has forced them to confront how many other students might be mislabeled or overlooked because they don't fit the standard metrics. The thought that his journey might make the path easier for others like him, students whose gifts remained hidden beneath the weight of conventional expectations, gave Ethan a deeper satisfaction than any personal recognition. Mr. Bennett appeared at the edge of the courtyard, Sarah Miller beside him. They approached slowly, giving Ethan time to compose himself. "The Mathematical Association of America representative asked me to give you this," Mr. Bennett said, handing Ethan an envelope. "They're very interested in publishing your visualization technique in their journal." Sarah Miller's eyes shone with tears of pride. "I always told your teachers you had a special way of seeing things. I just never had the vocabulary to explain how special." "We should get back," Olivia suggested gently, "before they send a search party for the guest of honor." As they walked together toward the glowing windows of the reception hall, Ethan felt a profound shift within himself. Not pride exactly, but a quiet certainty that he would never again allow others' limitations to define his potential. The weeks following the showcase brought dramatic changes to Ethan's academic life. After extensive assessment, Newton created a personalized curriculum that allowed him to take advanced university-level courses while remaining with his age cohort for humanities and social sciences. Teachers who had once dismissed him now sought his insights, sometimes with awkward deference that Ethan found more uncomfortable than their previous neglect. His fellow students regarded him with a mixture of awe and uncertainty, unsure how to reconcile the quiet outsider they had ignored with the mathematical prodigy now featured in academic journals and local news outlets. Some, like Jessica Thompson, attempted to rewrite history, claiming they had always known there was something special about Ethan. Others maintained their distance, intimidated by his intellect or resentful of his sudden elevation. Only Olivia treated him exactly the same as before, alternating between supportive friend and challenging critic as the situation demanded. Their partnership evolved into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared experiences, as outsiders who had found their own paths within Newton's rigid structures. One afternoon in late May, as they collaborated on an article about educational reform for the school newspaper, Olivia asked the question that had been lingering unspoken between them. So what happens next? MIT's quantum computing lab practically offered you a direct admission. Stanford wants you for their summer accelerator program. You've got options most seniors would kill for. Ethan considered the question carefully. The showcase had indeed opened doors he'd never imagined possible. Pathways to research opportunities and academic advancement that had seemed utterly out of reach just months earlier. "I'm still figuring it out," he admitted. "Part of me wants to dive into those opportunities immediately. But there's also value in experiencing a more normal high school journey, just one where I'm allowed to be myself fully." The transformation at Newton extended beyond Ethan's personal situation. Inspired partly by his story and partly by Olivia's persistent reporting, Headmaster Lawrence had commissioned a task force to evaluate how the school identified and nurtured student potential. Mr. Bennett emerged from his quiet role as librarian to become a key advocate for educational reforms, drawing on his considerable academic background to propose alternative assessment methods that recognize diverse forms of intelligence. Dr. Clark remained skeptical of these changes, warning about lowering standards in the name of inclusivity. But even he had moderated his position after several of his physics students demonstrated remarkable progress when allowed to approach problems through alternative methodologies. On the last day of the academic year, Ethan was summoned to Headmaster Lawrence's office. He found not only the headmaster waiting, but also Dr. Winters and, surprisingly, his mother. "Mr. Miller," Headmaster Lawrence began formally, "we've asked you here to discuss an extraordinary opportunity. MIT's Quantum Computing Initiative has proposed establishing a collaborative research program with Newton Prep, with you as the inaugural student researcher." Dr. Winters explained the details: a part-time research position that would allow Ethan to remain enrolled at Newton while pursuing advanced work at MIT 2 days per week. "It's unprecedented for a high school sophomore," he admitted, "but so is your achievement with the Convergence Challenge." Sarah Miller watched her son carefully, her expression a mixture of pride and protective concern. "This is your decision, Ethan. No pressure either way." Ethan considered the proposal thoughtfully. The opportunity was extraordinary, a chance to work with leading researchers in a cutting-edge field while still maintaining connections to his emerging place at Newton. Yet he was also aware of the responsibilities such a position would entail and the expectations it would create. "I'd like to accept," he said finally, "with one condition." Headmaster Lawrence raised an eyebrow. "And that would be?" "That Newton establishes a pathway for other students to access similar opportunities, not just in mathematics but across disciplines." Ethan leaned forward, finding confidence in his conviction. "My situation isn't unique, just unusually visible. There are other students with gifts that don't fit standard metrics." The request created a moment of surprised silence, followed by a slow smile from Dr. Winters. "I believe that's an excellent suggestion, Mr. Miller. Perhaps you could work with Ms. Reyes to help identify potential candidates." As Ethan left the office with his mother, the future stretched before him like an open road, challenging and uncertain, but navigable with the confidence of someone who had discovered his own capacity to redefine perceived limitations. "You know," Sarah said, as they walked through Newton's grand entrance hall, her arm linked with his, "your father once told me that the most important discoveries happen when someone looks at the same thing everyone else has seen, but thinks something no one else has thought." Ethan smiled, recognizing the truth in those words. His journey had never been about proving others wrong, but about finding the courage to trust his own vision, to see patterns where others saw only chaos, possibilities where others saw only constraints. Outside, Olivia waited by the ancient oak tree that had witnessed generations of Newton students passing beneath its branches. "Well," she asked expectantly, "are you going to be the next great MIT quantum computing genius?" "Part-time genius," Ethan corrected with a grin. "I've still got some unfinished business here at Newton." As they walked together across the sunlit campus, Ethan reflected that the most significant equation he had solved wasn't the convergence challenge, but a more personal one. Finding the balance between accepting guidance from others and trusting his own unique perspective, a solution that would continue to evolve and refine itself with each new challenge he encountered. Behind them, Newton Preparatory Academy stood as it always had, its imposing architecture a testament to tradition and excellence. But within those historic walls, something had fundamentally changed, a recognition, however reluctant, that true potential often flourishes not through conformity to established patterns, but through the courage to imagine entirely new ones. For Ethan Miller, once invisible within those hallowed halls, that recognition marked not an ending, but a beginning, the first step on a journey whose convergence point remained beautifully, promisingly undefined. Dear listeners, we hope that Ethan's journey of discovery and self-belief has resonated with you as deeply as it has with us. Sometimes the greatest barriers we face aren't the challenges themselves, but the limitations others place upon us, and more importantly, the ones we accept for ourselves. If you've ever felt misunderstood or underestimated, we've created a special playlist with similarly inspiring stories that you can find by clicking to your left. Did Ethan's mathematical breakthrough move you? Did you recognize yourself in his struggle to be truly seen? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up if it touched you. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore life's complexities and the triumph of the human spirit. Don't miss our upcoming content.